Hello and welcome back to The Intersect. We are excited to bring you our guest today, Father Justin Braun. Father Braun is the pastor of Sacred Heart Catholic Church, a bilingual parish in the northeast corner of the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. Father Braun was on the ground level of launching Bishop Strickland's St. Philip Institute, where he served in various roles since 2017. Father Braun regularly serves as chaplain to engage couple retreats for marriage preparation, as well as being a retreat and conference speaker for marriage enrichment. Grateful for the real world experience of his family, who provide tons of insights to the life of marriage and for the insights from preparing over 150 couples for marriage. He seeks to bring the family to Christ and Christ to the family. Father Braun, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you ladies today and to talk about this very important subject in the life of the church and the life of women and men everywhere. It's a good way to kind of help, as I know something you're trying to do is bridge the gap between religion and science and family and faith and all these things. So thank you all for your willingness to step into the breach and help lead the way.
Absolutely. So for our audience, Father Braun is actually a good friend of mine. He's been a friend of mine and my family's for how many years now? It's been a while.
Almost 10. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You married my husband and I. You flew all the way out to Virginia from Texas for that. And you were actually, I came to you right from the beginning, from the formation of Fan Base, asking for your counsel and spiritual direction. So you have been one of our biggest supporters from the get-go. So we're really excited to have you on today. So, we are not a overtly Catholic organization, but obviously Mary and I are Catholic. So let's just call out the elephant in the room. You're a Catholic priest, which means that you are celibate. And we invited you on to talk about fertility awareness, something that impacts people's sex lives and sexuality, which is going to seem kind of odd to those of our audience who aren't Catholic and maybe even a few who are Catholic. So why is it important, or even your business, for a priest to know about fertility awareness? And what is your role when you talk about it?
Okay, well, thank you. And an analogy I like to use with people, because it's helpful whenever I step into this very fun area with couples and preparing for marriage. You go to a specialist, right, when you have something specifically wrong with your body, right? And your general doctor refers you. But your general doctor has a good understanding of what generally is going on in your body, right? Well, as a doctor of souls, as a spiritual father, I need to know what's going on with your soul, most importantly, of course. But because your body is animated by your soul and your body are not disconnected. And so I think having a general kind of practitioner idea of what's going on with the whole person is a really important part of being a priest, because so often we're addressing issues when we're in spiritual counseling with people that are connected to their bodies, right? And they're connected to the way they're living their lives. And so having yes, I'm a celibate man. That means I'm not married. I don't date. I haven't in almost 20 years. You could say, well, Father, you've got no connection to this. Well, last time I checked, everybody I work with is a human being, right? And especially because I've had the benefit of working so intentionally and intensely with married couples, preparing for marriage and after marriage, and kind of all along that span of time. It's been my business to kind of grow as a general practitioner, to understand how your body relates to all the kind of facets of your life, but especially for me as a spiritual father, to understand how it's affecting you spiritually. But the church's relationship to this big kind of issue in the world is, we've been around for 2,000 years. We've seen the way the human condition works, right? So we're as the Second Vatican Council says, this great phrase that says we're masters of human nature. The church is a master of it understands human nature. So that's true. But that second word is nature. There is something natural, right, about every person. And that's a philosophical category, but also a scientific category. And so understanding that fertility is part of the natural order, right? And if I'm going to help you in the supernatural order, I need to understand the natural order. Makes it very reasonable for a celibate man who is not engaged and not, dating, but is meeting with, teenage girls and boys up to, people in their 70s and 80s. I need to know what's going on with your body. And fertility awareness is such a big deal because as science has kind of pushed us in these two polar opposites, right? Faith is over here, science is over here. Well, no, they're in a lot of ways, they're trying to answer two different questions most of the time, but where they intersect, that's where I have to be. That's where the minister of any church has to be, and even psychological professionals, they have to step into that place and help people make sense of what seems opposed, but in reality is really well joined together. So hopefully that shines some light on why I care and why every, priest, I think, especially needs to care.
Beautifully explained. And I love how you talk about the connection between body and soul. It's interesting because a lot of the times when it comes to family planning, people are trying to separate fertility from the woman and who she is, her body.
Right.
And, we see the error in that and the beauty of fertility awareness in bringing those things together. But also my husband and I are a marriage prep mentor couple. And I'll never forget when we were being trained, one of the things they teach us, especially when we're talking about sexuality, the instructor said that she used to tell her children, like before they go on a date, what you do with your body, you do with your soul. And what you do with another person's body, you do to their soul as well. And it was just this really cool way to put it all together. So anyway, going even beyond that. So it's no secret that the Catholic Church at least appears to have so many rules, right? We hear that as a complaint from a lot of different people, especially when it comes to sex. The message many receive seems to be a whole lot of, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that just frankly doesn't sit well with a lot of people. So what do you say to those, both Catholic and non-Catholic, who take issue with church teaching on sex and marriage, specifically because they find it antiquated or patriarchal or just plain impossible and heartless?
Each one of those probably is a whole episode in a lot of ways, but I like to, so I have three nieces, 20, 19, and 13, and my oldest nephew is married. And so I always think about that, like it has to have a real world application. What do I care about this question? I have sisters, obviously, who have had kids. I had wonderful women like Emily in my life who I've known for so long, but I know I have to have an answer for them. My nieces, I have a niece who's actively been dating a boy for 2 years, and this is something we've talked about. And the first thing is just realizing that when the church says don't do X, it's not about telling you no. It's really about saying yes to something else, right? License is the problem, right? We perceive freedom as license to do whatever I want. That's slavery. There's no real freedom in that, right? So understanding when the church says no to something, it's because it's trying to unshackle you from some kind of enslavement. Morally in the church, we would use the category of sinfulness, but for your non-Catholic listeners and for people maybe approaching this from a more secular angle, when the church says it's not good for you to introduce artificial contraception into your family planning, why take the church out of it? Why is this a bad idea from the medical perspective or the psychological or many other perspectives? Well, first of all, because it's something that's not natural, right? By definition, artificial contraception is introducing something that may occur naturally, maybe chemicals that occur naturally in the world, but it's introducing something to your system that's not occurring naturally, right? And so I think 99% of people, I'm 39, y'all are in y'all's mid to late 20s, I think. A lot of us grew up on the Mary, you may be feeling great right now. Like, yeah, sure I am. But a lot of us grew up in this movement in the culture of getting to natural things. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's unnatural about using a condom. Let's talk about what's unnatural about IVF. Let's talk about what's unnatural about so many other issues related to this question of what we can and cannot do. And so the church is really proposing, don't do these things, because these other things are actually A, what's good, B, what is natural, and C, what's going to do the most for you. So a specific example that you brought up is this sense of infertility. IVF is a very it's a very expensive medical procedure, right? That has a relatively low success rate. And regarding its effects on the family, you may have the benefit of bringing one or multiple children in the world through that process. But there's also a decent chance you won't. And the church is, looking at that specific question, not only from the reality that you are doing something unnatural, in terms of there's no intercourse, it's a medical procedure, but it's also something that's you're adjusting your eyes to think about bringing a child into the world as some kind of particular commodity, right? And that's not who we are. And I know that, I think, Mary, you've talked about some of the struggles, and Emily, I know we've talked about, like, IVF's an appealing option when you're struggling with infertility. I get that. Now, I don't, obviously the church teaches it's immoral, but also I would think, just from a basic rational perspective, if I'm willing to spend $30,000 on something that may or may not work, what is it that I'm really looking to fulfill? I want to be a mother. I want to be a father. And am I living that out in a natural and spiritual way already? And opening yourself to the idea that, maybe God does not want us to have children for whatever reason. There's a natural barrier, or the Lord is just not providing that grace in your life. But what other graces is he offering to me? And I think a lot of times when you get into those specific situations where you're saying no to something, you forget what you can say yes to, right? You get bogged down in the negative and the no, and you forget that there's this yes and this great positivity. So that may help a little bit, I hope.
That a lot of people kind of view church teaching through this lens of.
Emily, can you back up a little bit? When you first started talking, we couldn't hear you. So can you just start from the beginning again, whatever you're saying?
To build off of what you were saying, a lot of people see the church teaching as limitations, but as a limitation that's bad. We don't like infringements on our freedom. But, I once heard an IVF doctor describe the procedure. Like, what does it actually do to a woman's body? The only word that came to my mind was barbaric. That what they actually have to do to a woman's body in order to retrieve the eggs. And a lot of times women who suffer from PCOS, they already have polycystic ovaries, that the hormonal influx produces even more follicles. So it's exacerbating an already existing problem to extract these eggs to try to conceive. So the problem is that it's not focused on healing the woman. You were talking at the beginning, it's about holistic health. And that's the difference between the approach of IVF and the approach of fertility awareness. The approach of IVF is just get pregnant. It basically uses persons to achieve an end. Whereas fertility awareness says, I see you as a person who needs healing. Let's figure out how to heal. And then a woman who is whole can become pregnant. That's kind of, so it just flips the ideology on its head. But again, there's, even though the church says, IVF is wrong, maybe the science hadn't caught up to it at that moment, but, I don't know why this example came into my head, but I'm thinking like all the way back to Leviticus when, God said, don't eat pork. And the reason why was because there was something in pork that would make them sick. And so, the biology hadn't caught up, the science hadn't caught up to that understanding, but the law was there as like a protection. I don't know if that's like relevant, but that,
Yeah, no, it's great. Swine flu is not something we really talked about until the, 2000s or late 90s, but there's definitely something about, these divine laws that come to us that affect, that have a natural vision. So another example, a very simple one is, thou shalt not kill. Now, what falls under that is pretty significant. But when somebody takes it and removes it from its general context within scripture itself, and just says, let's apply this in a secular world, totally removed from any biblical revelation, it's a pretty good idea to not kill people, right? And we couldn't have, God couldn't have, or God could, but we couldn't foresee that, 2,000 years from then, or 3,000, 4,000 years from when the Levitical law was established, that we'd be talking about, right now, Roe v. Wade in the United States of America, because they couldn't have fathomed the ideas of how people would take other people's lives, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. But God saw in his wisdom that, hey, here is a law. It's a divine law, but it's also a natural law. Not killing is one of the natural laws. But it's just, we got to always see that there's this great ancient wisdom within what the church teaches that fully understands, like I said before, that human situation, and women particularly are, at the crux of so many of these conversations. So I'm so grateful, and just keep saying it again, like, for what y'all are doing, because I think a lot of young women especially feel at odds, maybe talking to a 39-year-old celibate man about some of these things. So I'm glad there's resources that they can go to help them through it.
Yeah, and I think that like when most women are thinking of IVF, they just know it as the only option too. It's just that's what you do when you can't get pregnant. They don't know the intricacies or the details of what's happening behind the scenes. They don't know that barbaric aspect of it that you were talking about, Emily. They don't most of them know about the financial concerns. Most of them don't know about how emotionally draining it is, even when successful, because that part is just kind of left hidden. And I think so, but that's why the formation is important. That's why people like you, Father Braun, can help form our consciences. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Form our conscience. There it is. Chris and I were so fortunate. I know a lot of Catholic couples are not this lucky, but like we actually never had a desire to do IVF. And I think that was a result of being formed to a certain extent and understanding. I knew it was not going to serve us as advertised. And it makes a big difference in the journey. Doesn't mean my journey was easy by any means, but I had that benefit of like, I don't feel that pull, the desire to even do IVF.
Yeah, and I think kind of building off of what you were describing, Mary, is that, when you go into your doctor's office and, the diagnosis is literally unexplained infertility, the only option they give you is IVF. They don't tell you these other options, and they don't even give you fully informed consent. They don't tell you how it works in your body. They don't tell you the cost beyond the financial, because I don't think that they're willing to have that conversation to a certain degree. But yeah, I think that with these types of topics, if we shift from approaching them more antagonistically and shift to approaching them with curiosity, why is the church saying this? What is going on? Instead of just rushing to a conclusion, well, it is this patriarchal, tyrannical, hierarchical, like oppressive, whatever you want to call it, and say, right, what's going on? Why is this, as a coach, when I'm meeting with women and couples and they're having difficulties in their marriage, particularly around this field of fertility awareness and NFP and the problems that brings to the forefront in their marriage, it becomes very difficult for them to navigate that. And they do kind of come back with a lot of questions. Well, why can't we do those things? And I usually try to turn that question around. Well, what is the motivation behind this behavior? What is it, and then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, well, that's, I don't want to think about that because that's bringing me in, in confrontation with things I don't want to confront. And it's like, I get that we don't want to confront those things, but that's the challenge, I think, ultimately. And it is a challenge, and that's okay. But yeah, to approach it with curiosity, I think is a better.
Yeah. And I just put a last point on that question, that consideration, like, go back to another medical analogy. Like if somebody gets cancer, what they don't do? They don't stop trying to figure out what's going on. They will, and I just spoke with a man this morning who's, or a woman whose husband is dying of brain cancer, and has a short prognosis, but you know what she's going to do? She's going to find out as much as she can about this thing, so that A, she has some sense of what it does, B, how can it possibly, if at all, be defeated or ameliorated in such a way that he'll have a longer lifespan, and she's going to give it her all. And am I an oncologist? No. Do I know much about brain tumors? No, I really don't. But what it does is piques my interest as a pastor to look and figure out, okay, she told me what specifically kind, so I can learn a little bit more about that, so that when she comes to me, I can have a conversation with her about what she's going through. And so for, again, this kind of question is patriarchal, is, this is not about me saying I have a bunch of knowledge or the church is going to impose this on anybody. It's saying, no, we want to work with you, but understand that we're not going to leave you with a simple answer and say, oh, we'll just take a drug, pay some money, figure it out. No, what's going on with you? What's going on with you? And hey, by the way, there's so much science now that helps us understand what's specifically going on with you, and we can help you. That the church has means of helping you, that there's medical procedures, there's medical counsel that you can seek that is actually going to help you, and not just to not apply a generic band-aid, but really get to the specific issue and heal as much as possible and help move forward.
Well, that's a great segue kind of into our next question. So, and you've talked about this as a priest, you are a spiritual father, and, you encounter people in very vulnerable positions, someone coming to you to talk about her husband dying of cancer, but also, everything from discerning family planning to using birth control or considering IVF, and even spiritual counseling after miscarriages or in the middle of infertility. So in your encounters with people, what has been the most impactful takeaway for you? And what I mean is, what do you find people are wanting when they seek your counsel?
Yeah, I had a girl this morning who had a miscarriage and she came in to visit. And so it's very fresh on my mind. I think first and foremost, they need to be heard. And I think women, this is not one of those mansplaining things, but I living with women my whole life and working with them, that's something that women desperately seek, is to be heard. And sometimes your husband doesn't. Sometimes your husband doesn't listen to you, right? Sometimes your dad, you call your dad, you need somebody to be consoled by, and we as men, we tend to try to provide solutions first and foremost. So I think especially with that challenge, but any fertility, family planning questions, is first and foremost is have somebody who's just going to listen as a loving, spiritual father who's not here to judge. You may have made decisions in the past regarding your fertility that are not in alignment with the church. Okay, great. Congratulations, you're a sinner. We don't get gold stars for being sinners, because we all have that issue. But just to be compassionate, and to listen to what specifically is going on. And I think this is where oftentimes we can be a little stronger. I think that priests especially we're weary of challenging people. We're weary of challenging people in this area, particularly because it requires heroic sacrifice to abstain. Frankly, I mean, you're women who love your husbands and you want to be intimate with him, and men who want to be intimate with their wives. To talk about abstinence and the challenge that brings with it. I had two sisters, one has 6 kids, the other had 4. The one who had 6 kids, she had 6 kids in 9 years. And she and her husband never used any, contraception. They've practiced natural family planning the entirety. They've been married almost 21 years now. And they haven't had a kid in 12 years because they've intentionally, avoided pregnancy because they had so much family in a short span of time. But having the ability to listen to my sister when, she's holding, she'll get done holding one of our friends' kids and she's like, I want one so bad right now, and just being able to kind of sympathize with her. And then, if she asks and wants to kind of just more intimately discuss what's going on in those struggles, to be there for her. But that's with all of you, with every woman and man who comes into the office, to just be able to listen and try to find compassion, but also to challenge, like say, okay, you are struggling with endometriosis. What's your doctor saying to you? Okay, that thing that he's recommending, here's why that doesn't, align with the church's teaching. Here's my challenge to you, to see maybe go talk to the doctor and say that's not an option for us. What else could we do? Maybe go talk to another doctor, or, as a good, trying to be a good dad, I'm going to say also, hey, here's a phone number to somebody that you maybe, or, you know, to direct them to your website and say, here's some people you can get in touch with. But I think listening and walking with you in that moment, but also be willing to challenge you to the higher call, to not weary in that challenge, but to grow closer to Christ in that challenge.
Father Braun, I'm so impressed with your understanding of fertility awareness. It's just really beautiful to hear you talk about it that way. And especially your understanding that it's not just about the charting itself, but walking with women beyond that. The fact that you brought up the importance of being heard is huge. And that's something I know a lot of women are seeking in counsel, in priests, in their church, in their community, solidarity. And I just think that's so beautiful. And I love how you're encounter or tackling that or handling that in your individual parish. It's just it sounds like you're doing a great job. So thank you for that. What is something that has surprised you as you learned about fertility awareness?
You girls, your bodies are amazing. It's human creation generally. It's amazing. Yeah. But dudes, we have pretty basic functions, right? But you can produce life. and that's just such a game-changing reality to think about. But I would say the biggest surprise, so I'm again 39. I've been, close to, and the pro-life issue has always been near and dear to my heart. But obviously, as growing up with two older sisters, seeing them go through the challenges that they've went through, both of them have had, difficulties. And so walking along through that the last 20 years more intentionally, really, I guess the biggest game changer for me was NAPRO technology and seeing, through the kind of gaze of the Marquette method, especially, and then going to the Creighton model and then meeting with and getting to know. And I'm very grateful my seminary formation put that in front of me, and it was like a non-negotiable. We are going to go through and meet with a NAPRO doctor every week for like 10 weeks. And yeah, it was intense. We were talking about cervical mucus way more than I ever thought that I would. And now I have to use that language because at least I know what I'm talking about for the most part. But I would say that just like the surprise of how awesome you are biologically, what your body's capable of handling. Quite frankly, men would never be able to give birth. We are such weaklings. But I'm always grateful to see that the science and the faith are working together and not in opposition.
Yeah, I love that. And one of our mutual friends, the lovely Deanna Johnston, has in no small part made sure that to talk about cervical mucus, and we love her for it. And we love you for it. It's always, I think, probably kind of jarring to people to hear a priest actually say cervical mucus and not flinch. It's like, whoa, okay. So you've kind of been talking about this throughout our interview, but I kind of was thinking we can just kind of put a nice bow on this. I want you to speak directly to your brother priests. What do you want them to know about fertility awareness that they should take into their priesthood?
More than anything else, a willingness, and I don't mean some kind of half-hearted, oh, well, I'll go to a conference once in my entire priesthood, but like, guys, grow up, be men. You're asking men and women to really do something heroic and, in our culture, extremely sacrificial. To live according to the church's teaching, to Christ's teaching on marriage and family life. We need to not just sit back and say, here's the challenge, see you later. But here's the challenge. I'm desiring to walk with you through that, and I want to help lead you. That's what a husband and a father does. And I'm a spiritual father to you and a husband to the church as my bride. So grow up, guys, get into this. It's not that scary. It's actually really fun. And I can speak from personal experience. Like Emily, that I love your mom and dad dearly. If you still lived here, I think I'd probably be, the third or the second uncle to your kids in Tyler, because family life is where our priesthood is, period. From cradle to grave, we serve people. And to shy away from such an important part of it is a sign, I think, of faithlessness as a father. So I just challenge priests to, grow up, learn, be willing to go to those conferences that talk about cervical mucus, and that's okay. Like, you may not ever use that phrase in any of your conversations, but at least you're not, sitting on the sideline being a passive observer, but really being a proactive and loving father.
Nice. I really appreciate your honesty. Just went right for it. Okay, so
This
now
is
that
exactly
you,
why I was like, he is gonna do this interview.
Yeah.
yes, the perfect option. So now that you've spoken to your brother priests, we have a question we ask all of our guests on this show. You can speak to the general public. What is your elevator pitch for fertility awareness?
Are you tired of not knowing what's going on with your body? Are you tired of having cramps, irregular periods? As a husband, are you tired of not really knowing who your wife is? Because this is part of who she is. Learn about your fertility. It's one of the greatest gifts God gave to you. Ladies, it's the gift that keeps giving in a literal sense to the human culture and to society. So please learn about it and be proactive in caring for yourself, because that's part of this. It's not just saying, oh, well, I learned something, but it's really taking better care of yourself, body, mind, and soul. So that's it. Just learn about yourself, because self-discovery is going to make you a better person and a better husband, better father, better wife, better mother.
Amen. Spoken very well. Thank you so much, Father Braun, for that and all of your amazing answers. Emily, anything you want to add?
This is gonna be a great episode.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Father Braun, thank you. And thank you to all who listened. We'll see you next time.